The Seahawks are only slated to pick once on day 2 of the 2024 NFL Draft, but could John Schneider look to jump in with a second selection? Nick Lee and I are going to be proposing a few trade opportunities for tonight's second round and third round here on our Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on Blue Friday Draft Edition by my co-host, Nick Lee, and a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening in nearby Renton, Washington, or in DeSoto, Texas, the land of Byron Murphy II. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks stuck and picked at selection number 16 yesterday to get Byron Murphy II instead of trading down like almost everybody thought they were going to. The downside of that, of course, is now there's not another selection until pick number 81. But could John Schneider decide to change that situation? We'll be diving into some trade scenarios here to open the show. And we've got post-first round dueling mock drafts. Where are the Seahawks going to go from here with the rest of this draft? It's a fun Blue Friday episode brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Now for your lead story here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Byron Murphy II is a Seahawk. John Schneider saying he was the organization's highest graded defensive player, and he fell right into their lap at pick number 16. That's the plus side when you have 14 offensive players, including 6 quarterbacks, go off the board consecutively to start the draft, an unprecedented draft with so many offensive players getting picked in the first round. And that allowed Byron Murphy II to be available for Seattle, and he was just too good of a player. They couldn't pass up the opportunity to draft him and trade down. The flip side of that, though, the Seahawks now have a huge gap until they pick at 81 overall, the only pick that they are scheduled to have tonight. Nick, I was talking about this some on the show yesterday, our Rapid Reaction podcast after the Murphy selection. I just can't see John Schneider being willing to wait until pick 81. Maybe he's got to wait till the third round to get another pick, but I just have a feeling that John Schneider is going to be thinking about trying to get a second, as you like to say, bite of the apple tonight, especially with some of the really good players that fell because of all those quarterbacks and offensive players getting selected at the beginning of the first round last night.
Corbin, I think it's more likely I quit drinking Mountain Dew than they go trade free this whole draft. And that's not happening, by the way. I was pretty surprised when I saw how the drafts broke last night that they didn't trade down, but I also get it. As soon as they had made the announcement of Byron Murphy, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. That made a lot of sense. So talking trade scenarios, getting back in the second round, getting bites at the apple in the second round, looking for a team that was a nice partner and maybe a team that needed a bit more, to recoup some picks. I noticed the New York Giants only have 5 more picks in the last 6 rounds, if I'm seeing this correctly. And, they might want to recoup picks in that 47 slot. I did another mock draft, simulated it. They've all caught up, which is cool. And I at 46, I saw that guys like Javon Bullard, Tyler Nubin out of safeties were still there. Edgerrin Cooper at linebacker was there. Jackson Powers Johnson was still there. So I ended up making a deal here at 47. So I gave the Giants pick 81, 102, and then a third round pick from next year to have the shot at, like I mentioned, Bullard or Nubin for safeties, Edgerrin Cooper, and then the one that really intrigued me at 47 was Jackson Powers Johnson. I had him going in the first round of the Seahawks, and here we are at, he gets into the late 40s and he's still there. Is it worth trading that package for a possible guard? I think so. I think at this point in the draft, you see a guy you really, really like that fits your need and in your mold and what you want to do on offense, you go get him. And he can be a guard or a center. You get him competing with Olu for center, and you got a one starting center, one starting guard. If you flip flop those guys, either way, you have, in my mock at least, you had several guys who really could be almost plug and play in some of the areas of need you have. So 47, I thought, was a sweet spot for me, given the Giants probably would like to recoup some picks, and the Seahawks have a little bit of ammunition to get over there.
Yeah, the only thing that I don't like about that proposal is now you have a gap from pick 47 to pick 118. So you've just moved when that gap is going to be. Now, John Schneider may be more willing to do that because he's going to go up and get a stud player at pick 47. So I could see this being something they do. If Cooper DeJean or Jackson Powers Johnson or Edgerrin Cooper or one of these players that had first round buzz is available into the 40s, then I do think John Schneider is going to start at least calling around to see, hey, what is the cost going to be? And we saw this yesterday in first round, Nick, that the trade that Jacksonville made with Minnesota, like the return they got back for that pick, 17 down to 23, that was nothing like I thought it was going to be in terms of compensation. So you might be looking at a cheaper price than what these draft value charts are showing. We don't know at this stage what it's going to look like. But from my standpoint, I stayed in the NFC East. If they're going to move into the second round, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are a team to keep an eye on. I could see Philadelphia trading up because they're very aggressive, but they have 2 second-round picks, and the 53rd selection is their second pick. Because it is 6 spots lower than the Giants, I actually wonder if you could pitch both the fourth-rounders and your 2025 third-round pick like you had in your trade, and you could swing this deal. The Eagles getting 2 picks on the beginning of day 3, and they're also getting that third-rounder to add to their arsenal for next year. And from Seattle's perspective, Nick, they're going to keep the 81st overall pick, which John Schneider might be able to do some maneuvering with that pick to recoup some selections on day 3. And so I think it gives you some flexibility. If you and I are looking at this, though, from a reality standpoint, could those 2 trades happen? Yes, absolutely. But I think maybe the more likely scenario with the Seahawks' current draft capital is getting a second, third-round selection. Instead of jumping into the second round, the price isn't going to be quite as expensive to do that. And there are a few teams in that third round that don't have very many draft picks that could be looking to try to gain some ammunition later in the draft, that Seattle might be able to swing a pretty good deal to move back in and get a second pick in that third round.
Yeah, for me, the Tampa Bay Bucks were a target for me in 89. Again, just referencing the mock simulation I was doing at 88, guys still available, like Kyrie Jackson, that corner out of Oregon I really like. Cooper Beebe, your guy, was down there at 88 for Kansas State. Mason McCormick, the guard at South Dakota State as well. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., the linebacker, also there. So 89, I thought was a good spot to try to trigger a trade. So I ended up giving 102 out of the 4th round. And then the very last pick, 235, is kind of throw in, and then a 4th round pick from next year with some of the talent they got. And it's easy, it's hard to evaluate who's going to be available next year, who's, what's the talent level for next year versus this year. It's impossible to tell that right now. But and then that kind of scenario where I saw those guys falling, I like that scenario, especially that run of interior linemen, BB there and McCormick there. That could be a good spot where you can get a possible plug and play interior lineman, because while I'm ecstatic about Byron Murphy, I'm still very concerned about the status of this interior line. So you'll notice these 2 mocks I've been doing have really centered around getting possibly a talented interior lineman. So my deal with Tampa Bay here to get to 89. And also, I don't give up 81. I don't trade down. I trade up in that scenario. I kind of go up 13 spots, really, if I'm doing my math right. So then you got 81 and 89 here to get really 2 shots at possible, a guy on the defense, perhaps a secondary or a linebacker, and then an interior lineman, 2 shots right there, 8 spots apart. That'd be huge.
The team that I am looking at in round 3 that I am guaranteeing is going to be trading down from that selection, it's the Chicago Bears, because after having 2 top 10 picks, they only have 2 draft picks the entire rest of this draft.
They've had a decent draft so far.
Is one of them. And so I have the Bears highlighted. This is a team, when you look at the picks that they've got, they really don't have much ammunition left. And even next year, they could use some picks. They're trying to build around Caleb Williams. And so I think you could swing pick 75 or get pick 75 from the Bears, trading them your first 4th rounder and next year's 3rd round pick. That would be about even compensation here. And you can get pick 75 without giving up pick 81. And again, there could be some ripple effects here. you can make a selection at 75. Maybe somebody like a Cooper Beebe or a Mason McCormick or a Dominic Pooney, one of those guards that you and I think has a chance to play early and be a really solid starter in the NFL. You might be able to get that player at 75 without giving up 81. And then you may have some interest at 81. You might be able to do some moving to get an additional day 3 pick and recoup for that 4th rounder you gave up. There are a lot of dominoes that can be at play when you start looking in these middle rounds. But I think the Chicago Bears are absolutely a team that the Seahawks will be making some phone calls with. If they haven't jumped earlier into this second day, that is a pick at 75 that I think there's a very good chance that the Seahawks could try to get their hands on it, double up in the 3rd round. Speaking of doubling up, it's time for another dueling mock draft. Earlier this week, we had our dueling mock drafts for all 7 rounds. Now that we know who's been picked in the first 32 selections, Nick and I are going to have some dueling post-first round mock drafts. Who do the Seahawks get in these final 2 days of the 2024 NFL draft? We'll be looking at 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round picks coming up next here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Now that I'm back in the site manager role at FanNation SI, LinkedIn Jobs is my go-to to post writing positions looking for top candidates, and it makes the process easy and seamless. LinkedIn Jobs isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, and it works so well that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, it's quick, it's easy. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to and makes the process faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode of your favorite Locked On podcast is brought to you by the best meal kit service in the game, Home Chef. No more having to answer the dreaded question, what are we going to do for dinner tonight? Thanks to Home Chef and their chef-designed recipes that are delivered directly to my door, all pre-packaged, pre-portioned. They even peel the garlic cloves for you. And each recipe, one of my favorites, blackened mahi, comes with a full page of easy-to-read instructions that include customization options and pictures to guide you along the way through the step-by-step process so you don't have to ask, is that what chard looks like? I cannot recommend Home Chef enough, especially right now, because for a limited time, Home Chef is giving Locked On listeners 18 free meals, free dessert for life, and of course, free shipping on your first box if you head to homechef.com/lockedon today. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Yes, you heard that right. Homechef.com/lockedon. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
You're listening to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined for today's show by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Make sure to check out last night, had a rapid reaction episode on the Seahawks first round pick, Byron Murphy. The second actually had 2 episodes, one being a quick hitter, and then we had a full episode as well, breaking down Seattle's selection at 16 overall. So make sure to listen in. It's on the Locked On Seahawks YouTube page, as well as all major platforms you can download for free. Nick, we're going into day 2 of the 2024 NFL draft, and John Schneider, he's going to be sitting, messing with his fingers a little bit here to begin the start of day 2, because the Seahawks don't have a pick until selection number 81, since they didn't trade down, or at least that's the way things are right now. As we just talked about to kick off the show, there are some possibilities for the Seahawks to get a second pick in the second day of the 2024 draft, whether that's in the second round, we're going to have to give up a lot more to do so, or getting a second, third round pick. Keeping that in mind, we're going to have some dueling mock drafts here post first round edition. Now that we know which players are still available, there's some shockers that are still on the board. The Seahawks, unfortunately, not in a position right now to get any of those players, but maybe they'll get lucky just like they did in the first round. And somebody that was supposed to be picked much earlier ends up falling into the middle of the third round. So keeping that in mind, you and I are going to be discussing day 2 selections. And I think you and I both are in agreement that John Schneider is going to find a way to at least get one more selection in the third or even the fourth round here with a trade.
Yeah, I know it's not a great feeling to sit there at 16 and go all the way down to 81. Well, I'm going to make us squirm a little bit more and have a trade down from 81 in my latest mock. So in my scenario, we're twiddling our thumbs all the way to 81, and they trade down with the Baltimore Ravens. Mike McDonald's old buddies over there in Baltimore, and the Seahawks get pick 93 and 130 for pick 81 there, so they get an extra pick there at 130. I like that. And then with 93, Jeremiah Trotter, a linebacker. I really think that the Seahawks need to hit on a linebacker in this draft. I am not really satisfied with the Jerome Baker and Tyrell Dodson duo right now. I think there needs to be a bit more youth and high ceiling. Dodson's a bit of an unknown quantity. Jerome Baker's been a decent linebacker for Miami, but I'm not really thrilled on the depth and the ceiling of this room. So I think Jeremiah Trotter could add to that, and especially with a guy like Mike McDonald, who already has shown he can really tutilize. They can be, the linebacker can be
Tutilize.
Tutilize. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Tutor. There we go. Tutor. What am I talking about? Tutor. What? Come on, Nick. He can tutor Jeremiah Trotter and become, a mold him into the linebacker that McDonald wants and needs. And while he might lack in those like true elite, athletic traits that people covet, he's got, of course, the bloodline, the high football IQ, the effort levels there, played in a big time program, big time games, and came through. You like to see that. And I wrote an article about how I think that Mike McDonald, at least with the Ravens, they seem to target kind of guys like that, that are accomplished from big programs. So Jeremiah Trotter makes a lot of sense there at 93.
I just can't get over the tutor words there. I really felt like I was listening to George W. Bush. It's tutorification. All right, let's get to my pick here. You went down. I'm going to be going back in the third round. I mentioned this as a possibility. I think the Chicago Bears are going to be wanting to move from 75 so that they can try to get an extra pick or two. In this case, they're going to get pick 102 from the Seahawks. They also are going to get a third round pick for next year. The Bears trying to build around Caleb Williams. And I'm going up to get a linebacker. You wanted Jeremiah Trotter. I don't know that Junior Colson is going to be there at 75, but the way that defensive players have already been pushed down in this draft, it is very possible that he could be there at 75. And we've talked ad nauseum about his link to Mike McDonald. He started as a true freshman for the Wolverines the 1 year that McDonald was the defensive coordinator at Michigan. And so these guys already have a very close relationship. McDonald knows what he can do, knows what he's capable of, what the future may hold for him. He is a early entrant, so another really young player that you can add to this defense that can push Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker on day one. So I'm taking him with that pick I acquire from the Chicago Bears. And my next selection here, I'm going to do a little bit of a flipperoo. I just traded up to get that pick. I'm going to move down with the other third rounder that I kept. And you mentioned the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the last segment. I'm stealing your trade. I'm moving down with the Buccaneers and getting pick number 89. I'm also going to be getting a 7th round pick as part of this package from the Buccaneers as well. A 4th rounder and a 7th rounder. I'm giving up number 81 and also giving up 118 as part of this package. So this is going to be an interesting draft. There's no question about it. But I think Mason McCormick getting that athletic guard that has started a ton of games at the SCF's level, played really well at the Senior Bowl. He is a guy that I'm really excited about. And there's a chance he could still be there at 89. This is a player that could play earlier than you anticipate, could compete for playing time right away. I just really like this kid, an off-the-chart athlete at the position with plenty of tenacity. So getting that interior offensive lineman to go with the linebacker and checking off 2 major needs in the 3rd round.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's the reason why I chose the Buccaneers as a partner, that kind of sweet spot there for McCormick. And going to round 4 now, I, with my trade down, have 3 4th-round selections. My first one, I'm a little uncomfortable how I waited so long for an interior or offensive lineman, but Dominic Pooney with my 102nd pick in 4th round out of Kansas. He's listed as a tackle, probably projects better as a guard in the NFL. I think the Seahawks really need to get at least one startable guard out of this draft after losing Damian Lewis and not retaining Phil Haynes. I know they got Laken Tomlinson there, but Anthony Bradford's still a somewhat unknown commodity as well. So Pooney, I mean, he was the left tackle for one of the better offenses in all of college football last year and played left guard in 2022 in Kansas when they still had a pretty good offense. Really good pass blocker, 90.4 pass blocking. Got the length, got the size you want. So he's a guy, if he's there at 102, still a possible starting guard for you here at pick 102. I'm a little uncomfortable, like I mentioned, how long I've waited for interior linemen. I think that they really got to strike multiple times along the interior line. So Pooney, I think, is a nice prospect where, all hell breaks loose. He does have that left tackle, experience as well, but I like him as a guard.
Yeah, I've actually got 2 more 4th-round picks. I misread my notes here. I traded pick 179, which is the first 6th rounder, not pick 118 as part of that deal with the Buccaneers. So I sent them 81, 179 to get 89, 125, and a late 7th round selection as part of that deal. So with those picks, the first one I've got at 118, Seattle needs to add another tight end to this room. I don't know that Cade Stover is going to be available at this stage of the draft, but aside from Brock Bowers, no other tight ends win the first round. That was expected. Maybe there's a run of them early on day 2, but there's a possibility you could have some really good tight ends that are available there in the 4th round around that 118 range. So Cade Stover will give you another really athletic pass-catching tight end that I think could grow into a very solid all-around player at the position. He was a linebacker when he first went to Ohio State. So he's a player that I'm looking at and thinking, yeah, there's a really good chance that he could be a really nice compliment right away for Noah Fant and develop into a long-term starter for the Seahawks at that spot.
Yeah, I like that. And we were thinking the same thing at 118, tight end. Cade Stover was gone for my simulation, so I did Theo Johnson, tight end at Penn State. I know the Seahawks, it was surprising that they brought back Noah Fant on a 2-year deal. I still think they need to add depth and youth to that tight end room. You lost Kobe Parkinson, lost Will Disley. Farrell Brown's, there's no guarantee he'll be there long-term. And so Johnson projects as a pretty decent either replacement for Noah Fant or a nice addition to Noah Fant, having 2 tight ends that could be athletic red zone threats. 6'6". I mean, not only 6'6", but a 98th percentile vertical leap with tight ends. I mean, that is a large target there in the red zone. So I like Theo Johnson there. And then I'll round out with my last 4th round pick. He's a guy that you've kind of touted before. With my 130th pick, I got from the Ravens in that trade down. I like Malik Mustafa, the safety out of Wake Forest. I think the Seahawks also got to get a safety in this draft. You lost Quandre Diggs. You lost Jamal Adams. I know Julian Lump's still there. He could fill in nicely at free safety. Rashawn Jenkins, fits better probably as a closer to the line of scrimmage safety, which Malik Mustafa kind of does too. Kevon Wallace as well. But I think that having a guy like Mustafa, especially if McDonald is wanting to use 3 safeties, he's got the traits to be a nice box safety. He's aggressive. He's that that spearhead kind of safety in the box. He doesn't shy away from contact, even with a slighter frame, kind of like an Earl Thomas. I know that's dangerous, but that physical frame, again, different prospects. But his heart, his aggression, he's been touted for his football IQ, which is important for a safety. I like him as a possible replacement there as a box safety. And then you've replaced a safety and a linebacker in those spots for me, where I'm still not. You're in similar situations where you signed a veteran there at safety and linebacker, but I think you got to add some youth and depth.
You mentioned traits, and that's what I'm going to be going with the extra 4th round pick that I added from the Buccaneers at 125. Jalix Hunt from Houston Christian, who played in the Senior Bowl. You don't see many small school guys that get an opportunity to do that, but off the charts athleticism. He used to be a safety and now has played the edge rusher position. He is very raw. It's going to take some time for him to be able to play significant snaps, but the Seahawks have a pretty solid edge group with Uchenna Nwosu now being back healthy. So they're not going to have to ask him to step in and play a ton of snaps right away. But this kid could end up being a really good player if you're able to coach him up and develop those traits into more polished football skills. So this is around the area, late 4th, early 5th, where you can start to take a shot on guys like that have those traits, and you're banking on developing them Hunt is an intriguing player there late in the 4th round. We come back, we're going to wrap up our dueling mock drafts. We've got our 6th and 7th round selections to finish things off for John Schneider's 2024 class. We'll get to those here in a moment on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I have a competitive side. We all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards. My favorite is the Moon, building up amazing cities and planets that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on their iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. I can rob their vaults of riches for myself, and the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all over the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or on Google Play. You're listening to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined for today's show by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there that are tuning in here on day 2 of the NFL Draft and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We're going to continue our post-first round dueling mock drafts. Nick, there's some surprising players that are still available. That is going to push some guys from the first round into the 2nd and 3rd. And there's also going to be some players we thought might be day 2 selections now that are going to get pushed into day 3. And so that adds a lot of intrigue even when we get into the 6th and 7th round, where the Seahawks right now are slated to have 3 picks and potentially more depending how the trades work out. Let's get to our 6th rounders, shall we?
Absolutely. And kind of how you were thinking with Jalix Hunt on the edge. I'm going Byron Murphy with pick 179 here out of UCLA. He's got the quickness and bend. He ran a 4.7 4.40, which is about 85th percentile for that position. He does struggle against the run, hence why he's around 6. Despite some athleticism, he's a bit of a, I don't know, one-trick pony might be mean, but certainly at round 6, you're going to get those guys, of course. And then, as you mentioned, you got Uchenna Nwosu, you got Darrell Taylor, Boye Mafe, those guys there on the edge where you don't need Byron Murphy. You don't need to reach for him to become, force him into action before he's ready. He can have that maybe limited 3rd down pass rushing specialist kind of role as you develop him. Maybe he does improve as a run defender. But I agree that they might need to address edge with depth and maybe a different set of skills. But him with his pass rushing ability, I think that's an interesting and intriguing pick in round 6. And then my second 6th round pick, I'm going to go as well, is I went interior line once again. Javion Cohen from Miami, formerly of Alabama. I think that, again, like I said, I think the Seahawks need to address the interior offensive line twice in this draft. And he was 6'4", 324. He can definitely be an anchor along the interior. He's got that necessary power to be an effective run blocker. Especially his numbers at Miami last year weren't as great, but at Alabama, he's definitely, displayed some of the power he can be in the run game. He was a bit better at pass blocking at Miami, so a little bit different offense. But he adds some needed depth. He can compete kind of in a similar way of Anthony Bradford that they got now. But I think adding 2 bigger guys in the interior could only help this offensive line.
You had Malik Mustafa earlier in the draft, who is my number 1 sleeper safety in terms of, I could see him becoming, I don't want to say he's going to become a star, but I could see him becoming a very good starter in the NFL. I have another guy on day 3 who has really been flying under the radar coming out of Air Force. I can't believe somebody from Air Force would fly under the radar, but that's what's happened with Trey Taylor. And this kid is a phenomenal football player. And oh, by the way, he is a big dude. We're talking a 6'2" safety that ran in the low 4.5s in the 40-yard dash. And he's got ball skills to boot. This guy picked off a bunch of passes for the Falcons the last couple of years. He had success as a blitzer. He can play in the box. And like I said, even though he's 6'2", this is a guy that can play single high and split safety looks as a free safety. And we've talked about Mike McDonald's need for versatility. Trey Taylor has been that guy that I've kind of had on my radar. If the Seahawks haven't gone safety yet on day 3, Trey Taylor's somebody that should be on their radar. as somebody that not only could be a long-term starter, but he could push some of the players you just brought in right away to play snaps as a rookie. And you can bring in another one of these players that is from the academies and give him an opportunity to make it in the NFL.
I love a story like that. I'm an Air Force family myself, so he's been on my radar too. I would absolutely adore that kind of story. For me, finishing out my mock draft, I know you got a few more. I got someone that's going to bring a smile to your face, Corbin. That is Frank Gore Jr. And
I don't know if I'm going to smile about it because it's another thing that makes me feel really, really old.
True. Just like Byron Murphy saying, "Oh, I grew up watching the Michael Bennett Seahawks." Like, oh, I just instantly became 85 years old. With Frank Gore Jr. here at 235. I mean, people might kind of turn their heads like a 5'8" running back. What's going on? First of all, you know the bloodline. You know he's got the high football IQ. He's got really natural vision. He was uber productive at Southern Miss. We're talking 2 straight years of at least 225 carries and at least 1,100 rushing yards. Had over 4,000 career rushing yards and 26 rushing touchdowns at Southern Miss. It's not terrible competition either. So, I mean, he was just a dog with Southern Miss at the running back. Now, can he pass protect? Can he be out of the backfield with his hands? That is honestly unproven. Maybe that being undersized, that might be a problem. But with Kenny McIntosh still in the room for the Seahawks, as well as of course Charbonnet and Walker, Wytick, another one. Some teams need 4 or 5 running backs to get through a year and to have in their depth chart. So I think a guy like Frank Gore Jr., first of all, it's just fun to have a Frank Gore, and then secondly, he's got the IQ, he's got the elite production in college, he's got the vision. See what he's got in preseason. Maybe he could become one of those preseason game kind of heroes. But I think it'll be a lot of fun. Take a flyer on a guy like that late in the 7th round.
Yeah, I'm going to stay on the Kamani Vidal train to start off the 7th round. I think I've picked him in all but one of my mock drafts this year for the Seahawks because the sweet spot has been in the 6th or 7th round, and I just love the makeup. And I'm going to continue saying it for those arguing we don't need to draft a running back. When you get to this stage in the draft, you're just trying to get the best players that you can get your hands on, whether it's traits or guys that you think could come in and compete. Kamani Vidal can do that for you on day one. He can push Kenny McIntosh in that running back room. He is the best pass protector that I have graded in my 11 years now that I have been scouting college players. He is a phenomenal pass protector. He brings physicality, great technique. He understands his assignments. And, oh, by the way, he was one of the top 3 rushers in college football last year, and he finished 2nd in yards created after contact. These are the things that make John Schneider gush. That's not going to change with Mike Macdonald. In fact, it might be something that ends up becoming more highlighted with Mike Macdonald, wanting to bring a physical presence. I see Thomas Rawls with better vision and better pass protection skills. That's what I see in this kid. And so if you can get him there in the early 7th round, then I am absolutely making that pick. And to wrap up my draft, I got that extra 7th rounder from the Buccaneers. The Seahawks have a history of drafting running backs and receivers. They do it almost every draft. Tyler Lockett isn't getting any younger. They need some kick return help potentially. Anthony Gould from Oregon State, electric athlete. He's a tiny guy, but I don't care. He is a blur on kick returns, and he actually had pretty good production the last 2 years as a complimentary receiver. I can see him continue to develop in that realm. He's also a guy you can run the football with on jet sweep some. So Gould is a player, I think, in the 7th round, maybe even in the 6th round. He is a receiver because of that special teams multiplicity, the running ability, just how electric of an athlete he is. If you can get a guy with those kind of traits late in the draft, you take that pick. So I'm getting a couple offensive skill players to cap off this mock draft. And we'll see what ends up happening, Nick, because we just mentioned there's a few players there that we picked on these day 3 selections that we were talking day 2 with potentially. But a lot of guys are going to get pushed down the board because of how things played out in that 1st round with all the quarterbacks and just the offensive players in general. So it is going to be an exciting day. We'll see if the Seahawks find a way to get more than one pick. Right now, they're just slated to pick 81 overall, but John Schneider might have a trick or two up his sleeves, and we'll find out tonight as the draft continues in Detroit. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at Nick Lee 51. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to ensure you don't miss a single episode. I'll have a bonus show coming up tonight once we have an idea which player or players that the Seahawks select on day 2 of the draft. Make sure that you're listening in. Enjoy day 2. Go Hawks.